We are outside Macbeth's castle right now, where we receive notice of our king's current state. He seems to be losing it. Macbeth, after being reigned as king, realized that the witch's prophecies may actually be true. Although after understanding this, King Macbeth understood that Banquo's prophecy would most likely be true as well. Because Macbeth wanted to keep the royalty within the bloodline, he understood that he would have to kill Banquo to end his chances of his prophecy becoming true. The prophecy states that Banquo's descendants will become future kings. Obsessed with royalty over loyalty, Macbeth is changing for the worse. This way of thinking signals a complete shift in attitude from Macbeth. Macbeth went from the hero that we all know to his own victim of blind ambition. Lady Macbeth's previous actions in murdering the king now more so represent Macbeth's way of thinking. Macbeth has developed a need for power and is now the aggressor doing these heinous acts. This ambition that Macbeth possesses is his true tragic flaw and may be his downfall in the near future. If only those pesky witches would have stayed away.
Thank you, Kevin. We're stationed here in the basement of Macbeth's castle and just witnessed this. Macbeth walked in the room and saw something. He swore it was the ghost of Banquo. He was frightened by this and began to freak out. This frightened everyone else in the room. Lady Macbeth noticed this, so she informed everyone that he had a mental condition and everyone should calm down because nothing's wrong. She pulled him out of the room to calm him down. Here's a clip we captured when Macbeth returned to the room.
And the pledge! Avaunt and quit my sight! Let the earth hide thee! Thy bones are marrowless. Thy blood is cold. Thou hast no speculation in those eyes which thou dost glare with.
Think of this.
It seems that in this clip we had just watched, he is talking at the ghost and telling him to go away and never return, with no response. He says, "Stay in your grave where dead people belong." This could be confused to be a soliloquy, but everyone in the room is seeing this happen and they see no ghost. It was never made clear if this was a hallucination and or Macbeth is having some sort of PTSD from killing Banquo. Here is a second clip that we captured. It shows Macbeth talking to the ghost of Banquo once again.
Pleasure of the time.
What man I dare approach thou like the rugged Russian bear, the armed rhinoceros, the heckin' tiger, take any shape but this, and my firm nerves will never tremble or be alive again, and dare me to the desert with thy sword, if trembling I inhabit, then protest with the baby of a girl. Hence, horrible shadow, and real mockery.
In this one, it seems that Macbeth may want to fight Banquo. He goes on to tell the ghost that he is braver than him and than any other man, and will fight him in any other form than a ghost. He will even fight him if he comes back to life. We can see from this scene that Lady Macbeth is also using Macbeth so she could be queen, using him for a title. We can also see that Macbeth's superstition and paranoia is causing him to go insane. Lady Macbeth completely ignores this condition after the guests leave, disregarding that this could be really serious. You can see that she just wants to ignore what had happened and live her normal life as queen. Her way of solving this problem was basically by telling Macbeth to give it up and grow up and move on. Thank you for your time. On to Mike for Act 4.
Hey Scotland, welcome back from the break. We are currently live at the scene in the witch's lair, going into the next story in today's news. King Macbeth's visit to the three witches. Macbeth is visiting the three witches to learn about his future. The witches have just summoned the apparitions that told Macbeth his future. The first apparition he just saw was an armored head, and it told him to beware of Macduff. This was no surprise to Macbeth because he already assumed Macduff as an enemy. The second apparition appeared as a bloody child and told Macbeth to be violent and fear no one because nobody born from a woman will harm Macbeth. This reassures Macbeth because he now thinks Macduff cannot kill. However, Macbeth, still trying to keep his crown at all costs, said he will still kill Macduff just to be safe. The final apparition appears as a child with a crown. It told Macbeth to not worry of his enemies because Macbeth will only be defeated when Birnam Wood marches to fight him at Dunsinane Hill. Macbeth reacted to this with much enthusiasm because he does not understand it. He believes that trees cannot march to his castle, so he thinks he will never be defeated. Macbeth's perspective changes because he learns the way he is defeated. He thinks he can prepare for the Birnam Wood battle. Macbeth's false interpretation of the Birnam Wood prophecy causes him to lower his guard. This news lowers his paranoia and fear of others conspiring against him. He believes he will be king his whole natural life. After this reassurance, he asks the witches a final question about Banquo's descendants. He just learned that the prophecy of Banquo is true and that he is the father of many kings. I think this causes much frustration and anger in Macbeth. I think his anger is causing him to act violently upon hearing about Macduff's fleeing. Ordering to kill his family and raid his castle is a lot more brutal than just killing him as a precaution. This is a quote he said after hearing about Macduff's departure. "From this moment, the very firstlings of my heart shall be the firstlings of my hand, and even now to crown my thoughts with acts, be it thought and done." In this, he is saying how he will act immediately when he decides to do something. We've just gotten news from a reporter at Macduff's castle going to you now. Hey, Scotland, I'm outside Macduff's castle. I've just finished interviewing Ross as he just finished talking with Lady Macduff. We're told Lady Macduff heard about her husband's departure and she was confused, angry, and upset. She started blaming Macduff as one of the traitors among the Scottish elite, and when Ross defends him, she says, "Wisdom to leave his wife, to leave his babies, his mansion, and his titles in a place from whence himself does fly." She meant that fleeing the country that your wife and children are still in is not very wise. She was angry with Macduff and called him a traitor. Her reaction to Macduff's departure, I believe, is justified because of the conspiracies among the Scottish elite. Nobody knows who is loyal to who and what intentions people have. She does not know the reason behind his departure, so she is left to believe the worst. I also believe Macduff's trip is justified because of the situation in Scotland. Securing Malcolm's crown is important to Macduff because his home in Scotland is being ruled by the tyrant Macbeth. He goes to England to get Malcolm back to Scotland and free his country. When Macduff's mother tells her son his father is dead and a traitor, he asks what happens to traitors, and his mother replies saying the honest men hang them. He replies saying, "Then the liars and swearers are fools, for there are liars and swearers enough to beat the honest men and hang up them." He is saying how there are more liars than honest men, and that the liars could overpower honest men with their sheer numbers. This is very interesting to think about. Are the honest men lying about their honesty? Do liars hide among us as honest men to avoid the punishments of lying? Stay tuned to find out what happens to liars like Macbeth, because we're going to war.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jimmy O'Malley, and I'm here presenting live in our Scotland studio to present to you MSN News, otherwise known as Medieval Scotland News. Breaking news tonight. Lady Macbeth is sleepwalking. Dramatic irony, Macbeth's fall, and the witch's role in Macbeth's fate. A doctor and a gentlewoman both told Medieval Scotland News that Lady Macbeth has been sleepwalking during the night. Lady Macbeth goes into this trance with a candle in her hand. She talks of the murders of Lady Macduff and Banquo. She seems to have blood on her hands, but claims that nothing will ever wash it off. As she leaves, the doctor and the gentlewoman marvel at Lady Macbeth's slow descent into madness. There is dramatic irony here because all the readers know that Lady Macbeth is talking about Duncan's murder, while the doctor and the gentlewoman do not know. This just in. Outside the castle, a group of Scottish lords are discussing the military situation. They claim that they will meet up with the English army led by the late King Duncan's son, Malcolm. Both of the Scottish and English forces will meet up to take down Macbeth and overtake the Scottish throne to its rightful heir, Malcolm. Macbeth is reportedly now striding around his hall, claiming that none of a woman shall ever harm him. The witches reportedly told that medieval Scotland News that they told Macbeth that the power of man, none of a woman born, shall ever harm Macbeth. 10,000 English soldiers now stand outside Macbeth's castle. After the English army arrives in and starts fighting, Macduff challenges Macbeth to a fight. They start fighting, and Macbeth tells Macduff about how nobody born from a woman can ever harm him. Macduff tells Macbeth that he was born from a C-section from his mother. Macbeth slowly realizes that this is how he will be defeated and die. Macduff will emerge from the castle with Macbeth's head in his hand and proclaims that Malcolm is now the King of Scotland, and Malcolm will declare that all the thanes will be made into earls. Medieval Scotland News believes that the witches have had a great effect on Macbeth's behavior in this story. The witches have had a strong effect on Macbeth's character because they highly influence him on his accomplishments and awake his ambitions. They give Macbeth a false sense of security. They tell him that he will be the Thane of Cawdor, and that immediately becomes true, and then he starts thinking about how he will eventually become king. The witches implant the idea of killing Duncan and eventually Banquo into Macbeth's mind. Macbeth has a false sense of security. He thinks that nobody will ever be able to harm him. Eventually, fate catches up to him, and Macbeth is killed by Macduff. Macbeth should have known that he will not be king forever because he heard the prophecy on how Banquo's descendants will eventually become kings. Yeah, again, my name is Jimmy O'Malley from Medieval Scotland News, MSN News. I hope everybody has a good night.